So hello, everyone. Welcome to the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research Wellness webinar, Managing Isolation. I'm Mindy Buchanan. I'm the Director of Patient Programs, and I'll be the moderator today. First, I want to make sure that we thank our amazing sponsors, Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals, for their support of our awareness programming this year. So thank you to Mallinckrodt. And next, I'm going to go over a little bit of housekeeping. So as you guys know, this is a webinar. We are not able to see or hear audience members. This means that if you raise your hand, use the raise hand function as a participant, will not be able to respond directly. The chat feature works only as a message directly to speakers and moderators, so myself and our expert. So feel free to use this if you'd like to chat us directly. I will be able to chat with you in the audience, and that's where I'll be adding any links discussed in the session today. We'll also send the links out in the post-event email. You may send your questions throughout the webinar directly or add them in the Q&A feature at any point. You have the option of submitting a question anonymously through the Q&A feature as well. So if that's a preference, you can go ahead and do it that way. This webinar is meant to be interactive, so there will be portions where our expert will do an exercise, pose a question, and so it will be great to have you guys engage in that through the chat function. If you have any technical difficulties, please chat me directly and I'll do what I can to help. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our expert today, Wendy Griffith. Wendy is a licensed clinical social worker and program manager of MD Anderson's Cancer Center Adolescent and Young Adult Oncology Program. She has over 15 years of healthcare experience that includes clinical work with patients, caregivers, and macro level work involving project development, management, and quality improvement. Wendy has worked with children and young adults for over a decade, starting with her undergraduate and graduate internships, where she first found her love of oncology. Wendy joined MD Anderson in 2008 as a social worker in the head and neck clinic, where she had the opportunity to provide counseling and resource linkages to patients of all ages. Welcome, Wendy. And with that, I will hand it over to you.
Awesome, thanks. All right, hi everybody. I'm gonna pull up my screen. Give me a second to swap the view so that I make sure y'all see the right screen. And there we go. Okay, so welcome to tonight. We're gonna talk about coping through isolation, which is a topic that I have been talking about with patients pretty consistently for the last 2 years. And even now, and honestly, even before COVID, we were talking about isolation and how to cope with that. So tonight we're going to explore what isolation can look like and feel like, review some tips and tricks to facilitate connection and communication, and discuss strategies for creating your own coping plan. So Mindy gave a great summary of sort of my professional experience. So about me, I am a dog mom. She is here sleeping next to me. If an Amazon truck drives by, you'll probably hear her barking ferociously. I am an aunt. My nephew lives in Austin. I love him to tiny pieces. I love to travel. I love my job at MD Anderson. I've been very fortunate to work in a lot of different settings and meet a lot of different patients of all diagnoses, of all ages, some with just autoimmune diseases and not just cancer, some with chronic illness. And so I draw on a lot of different areas from my experience. And so tonight you'll hear me say this multiple times, but I obviously come at this through a lens of oncology. And so some of the references I give may be more oncology related, but a lot of them run so parallel to a lot of chronic illnesses and run very much parallel to sarcoidosis. And so I hope you find it relevant. As Mindy said, I would love for you all to use the chat and use the Q&A box. I do love interaction. And so as I'm talking about things that resonate with you, definitely let me know. So to get started, I first wanted to really explore this concept of sort of isolation versus loneliness. And I think we use those terms interchangeably, and sometimes they aren't interchangeable. You know, when you have any kind of immunocompromised thing going on, then you're not able to connect with people in the same ways. And so whether that's just your counts are low, or whether you have an autoimmune disease or any other chronic illness, or there's COVID going around, or you have a combination of all of those things, there are various reasons at different points in life we may need to actually be isolated. So isolated, through multiple Google definitions, is defined in various ways. One of them having minimal to no contact with others, far away from people, not near to other places. And as you can see, the theme here is really on distance, on objects, on nouns. It's really sort of a descriptor of distance. Lonely is very different, and they define that as being without company, sad from being alone, distressing feeling that comes with being alone or separated from others. And so obviously through these, you can see the theme is really more about the feelings and the emotions. And so when some people say, you know, I feel really isolated, that can be absolutely true. And then on top of that, there can be a feeling of loneliness. And I've already got a couple of messages from people saying that it's hard and they feel lonely because they can't even see their family. And COVID has separated everybody significantly. And so I think that definitely gets to the physical isolation, but also the emotional loneliness. One of the complicating factors I think about loneliness is that it's not just one feeling, it's a lot of feelings. And some of those are not even listed here, but in general, sad, anxious, scared, disappointment, frustration, feeling numb, feeling unworthy or unlovable, or like they're not of use to anybody. So all of these feelings can really pile on in a time when you're not feeling like yourself and where you're feeling disconnected from other people. And so it is not just one thing, it's a lot of things at one time, and it can be really complicated. Some of the other complicating factors that sort of add to this is that outsiders, and by outsiders, I actually even still mean loved ones and family members and friends, but nonetheless, sort of outsiders to your experience, sometimes they assume that once an event has passed, that it's done, or that it's under control, or that it's being managed. And so things must be going back to normal. And so, as many of you have probably experienced, like it can be under control, but it doesn't mean it's not hard. And maybe this particular episode is done, but then there can still be fear of another episode or another admission or another time where you're feeling shortness of breath or heart palpitations, or you notice other symptoms. Maybe you have a flare up and your fatigue is just off the charts. And so people can kind of assume that just, oh, that episode passed, and so you must be back at it. But sometimes there's a really long healing period that comes after that, and it requires some just downtime and recovery. And there's a lot of also feelings that come along with that. So that can be complicated. And as I kind of mentioned below, it can be exhausting to constantly have to explain to people what's happening. Support often decreases across the board over time. So between family members and friends and even coworkers, like sometimes just as time goes on, they just kind of assume that they don't hear about it as much. And so you must be doing well, or you must be taking care of it. And so they don't offer the same amount of like, let me check on you and how are you doing? And let me connect. And, you know, how can I support you? What do you need? We find that over time that decreases. The pre-sarcoidosis life doesn't exist anymore. And that's a really tough one too, that a lot of times we feel like this event has happened, my life has changed. I got X, Y, and Z treatment. Now I know what it is. So I should go back to normal, right? But it doesn't, because now the path has changed. And now you know so much more about life, about what you value, about like you have new fears, you may have new perspectives, your true like physical energy levels may have changed, your body may have changed. Like there are just changes that happen that mean that that life doesn't exist anymore. And so it's difficult to sort of find that. I know people use the words new normal a lot, and definitely in oncology, sometimes it's a little bit overused, but just the fact that that life doesn't exist anymore, and it's really hard to navigate this like fog of a different kind of a future. And then obviously when you layer COVID on top of that, which also has a lot of unknowns, a lot of fears, a lot of uncertainties, a lot of things that we're just kind of finding our way through, there's just a lot of unknowns. And so it can really make sense that people feel sort of disconnected and lost in that. I think a lot of patients can feel guilty or needy or just plain tired of having to constantly explain or having to ask to be considered. Like, hey, I know you guys are gathering for this family event. I really want to be included, but I can't be around people. So can we find a way to do it virtually? Or, I know you guys are actually getting together in person. Is there a way that we could do it socially distanced? Or I know that we're doing this and it's a small group, but I would really appreciate it if everyone was vaccinated and if everyone wore masks and if nobody ate or drank, the same foods that I was eating and drinking. And just really having to constantly set that expectation and ask people to make that effort for you. It just can get exhausting. And even if it's not exhausting, you can feel guilty feeling like you have to ask for that all the time. And obviously in an ideal world, we would love it if our family members and our loved ones just proactively made that effort. But I think we find that over time, again, sometimes that decreases. Another interesting thing about isolation and feeling lonely is that I know a lot of people who actually really love alone time, and they would say, I enjoy being alone, but that doesn't mean you still can't feel lonely. So there are plenty of introverted people who do really like to be alone and really like their alone time, but they still really like to connect and they still like to feel wanted and engaged and with their people. And so it is very much possible that both can be true. You can enjoy alone time and also feel lonely. I think it's also probably happened for a lot of people where you start out the day and you think, I'm going to have a great day. I have these lists of to-do things. I feel great. I don't really feel the need to connect with anybody. And then by the end of the day, you have this sort of vague feeling of like just yuckiness and it's sort of unnameable and it's just sort of this fog. And then you can identify like, oh yeah, I did have a great day and I did get a lot done, but I still really wish I had someone to share that with and to talk about it with and go over it with. Energy levels can be unpredictable, and I'm sure you all can find that to be true. With the best of intentions, we can schedule get-togethers, even virtually or FaceTimes or things with people. And then you wake up that day and you realize it's just not going to happen, or you don't have the energy to make that happen. And I'll talk in a second sort of about the spoon theory, which I'm sure a lot of y'all have heard of and are familiar with, but I think it's something really important to touch on because just energy levels, energy is such a precious resource. And so you do have to protect it. But it can be excruciatingly difficult to protect it when really all you want is to connect with people, to be with people, and to not be lonely and to not be isolated. Lastly, I would just say that there is no magical answer or solution. And so I love that all of you are here. And I think this is a really important topic to talk about and connect over. I wish I had the answers for you. And I wish I had just a magic wand to make it all go away. The truth is that it sucks, like being alone and having to isolate, and especially through a pandemic, sucks. The pandemic itself sucks. And so we don't get to change that and we don't get to fix it. And so what we can do is what's within our control. How can we adapt? How can we adjust? How do we cope? How do we work around it? And so that is really what we're here to do. So another thing with identity or with isolation is that we find a lot of times it sort of coexists together with your identity, and sometimes not in the best way. So it can feel like, man, I am so lame. I'm such a loser. I can't go hang out with my family, or I can't go hang out with my friends, or they're all going on this trip and I really want to go, but I can't because X, Y, and Z. I don't feel comfortable being around people. I don't feel well enough. I don't have the energy. I'm not traveling right now, X, Y, or Z. It can feel like I am this thing when really these are the circumstances that are beyond your control that you're just navigating. So you think of that, the analogy. So it's almost like you're the ship navigating the water. It's like the water is what has been given to you. Like you're just trying to like figure out your way through it. It's not who you are. And that can be hard to separate. Like this is just the current situation, the current circumstances. This is what you've been given. And so adjustments do have to be made. And that can be the difficult part to accept. So some questions to sort of ask yourself are, do you genuinely want connection, or do you feel a pressure to want connection? Because sometimes there is sort of this group effervescency kind of thing, or this group connection, or this not peer pressure, but just almost like the FOMO or the fear of missing out where people are doing things. And so we want to be there, or at least in our minds, we feel like we want to be there. Oh yeah, someone just made a really good point. They feel pressure from church. That's such a good one. That they want you to be there. They want to worship together. They want to do Bible study together. They want you to be there and to be included. And sometimes in theory, it sounds great and you want to too, but maybe when you really think about it, you feel like, actually, I'm better staying at home. I'm better doing this virtually. I'm better doing this on my own because I don't feel comfortable being around people. And even if I were to go and I were to wear a mask and I were to bring Lysol wipes and I were to be around all these people who promise me they're going to be comfortable, or take precautions, the whole time I might be thinking and worrying and just thinking about all the worst case scenarios of possibly getting sick or having an episode. And so then it's not actually enjoyable going to church when the whole time I'm just really worried about what could potentially happen. And so just thinking through, like, what is your personality type? What are your interests? What do you like? What do you like and what do you need? And if that really is connection, that's like totally great. And we can pursue that. But just, we want to think through, is it really what we want, or is there a pressure to be there and to want those things and to want that kind of connection? So another question I like to think through with people is, are you feeling isolated from yourself? Are you feeling isolated from your support systems? And or are you feeling isolated from the world at large, which is a very sort of like existential thing. And obviously like that's actually a part where sometimes church and religion and spirituality can actually really help. But that just kind of helps in our own minds sort of sort through, what are we actually experiencing? Like, where is the feeling coming from? So that way we know how to identify it and sort of tackle it, if that makes sense. So those are some questions that we can ask ourselves to kind of hone in on it. When you're having a bad day or a hard day, try describing it almost like you're a reporter versus identifying it as of like, I am this sick person. I will never be well enough. I will never have the energy again. As someone wrote in the registration forms, like, I'm a loser because I can't do things. Like that takes it on as you, like you as the human are those things, but really like you are a fun, loving, caring person who wants to connect with people and do fun things. There is just a situation happening where medically you're not able to do that thing right now, or it's not the safest thing for you to do right now. You don't want to have any risk of exposure. You have to protect yourself. You have to protect your body. You have to protect your health. And so that's what it is. It's the situation you're in. It's not who you are. And so sometimes being the reporter and describing it can kind of help us separate from it and have it not be so in ourselves. And then also it's important to separate fact from assumption. And this is a tricky one, but I mean this in multiple different ways. So even in terms of risk levels. So sometimes we make assumptions about what our risk level is. And so it can be really important to actually talk to your doctor and say, here is a spectrum of things I would like to do. I would like to sit with some friends on my porch and have a cup of coffee, sitting 6 feet apart, but obviously we wouldn't be wearing masks. Is it okay to do that? And let your physician guide you. And they may say, you know what, no, that's actually still really risky. You're very fragile right now. I would really prefer if you truly, isolate from everybody. They may actually surprise you and they may say, yes, I think that's fine, but truly measure the distance. Or, I think that's fine, but I'd really rather you not eat or drink. I think it's safer if everyone has their masks on at all times. Just get some input from your doctor and I really identify truly what your risk level is. And obviously, they're going to give you the best information that they have. None of us is perfect. We're not all knowing. We make the best decisions we can. But at least then you'll know and you have something to go off of versus just assuming I'm a level 10 risk level. I cannot do anything with anyone, anytime. All I can do is be shut in my house at all times. Maybe there is some wiggle room in there. And I think your medical team can be the perfect people to help figure that out. So just not making assumptions about what we can and cannot do. Definitely involve your medical provider. The other thing is we make a lot of assumptions sometimes about friends and family about like, well, they did this birthday party for whoever and nobody told me and it's because they just didn't want me to come. And so we then go down the spiral of thinking like, they don't like me anymore. They're tired of taking care of me. They're really annoyed by my diagnosis and me talking about my fatigue or me talking about being isolated. And so they're just leaving me out on purpose. And listen, that could actually be true. That could be a truth. And that would be really hard to hear. And that'd be really hard to bear that truth. But it also could be true that possibly they were actually thinking of you and saying like, we don't want to hurt her feelings. We want to protect her. We know that she can't come. We don't want to make her feel worse about it. So we're going to have this little gathering. Let's not talk to her about it. And instead we'll do something with her on a different day in a virtual way where we can make her feel included. And so it is possible they're intentionally leaving you out of things. It's also possible that they're actually just trying to protect you and protect your health and make sure that you don't get sick. And they're just trying to protect your feelings too. So sometimes you make assumptions, and it can be important then to talk with them about it and say, listen, when this happens, XYZ, I feel XYZ, I feel left out. I feel like you don't love me anymore. I feel like I'm not included. I feel like I'm not a part of this family. I feel like I'm not a part of this friend group anymore. And so it's important to really talk with them about it and share that so they can tell you back. And again, it could be possible that what you hear back is, you're right. It is really hard for us to make the kind of accommodations you need. We don't feel equipped to do it. And so sometimes we're going to end up hanging out without you, or we feel like that it's just not a good fit right now. And we need to not include you for a little while you're going through this phase. And then kind of there's your sign of like, maybe these are not your people, or maybe these just aren't your people right now. You look through a couple of the comments really quick. You guys are amazing and sending in some really good information. Having too many complications going on at this time, so I isolate for my safety. Yeah, absolutely. I'm introverted, but I like getting out in small groups. I'm on Zoom too much for work. I have to pick and choose how I want to spend my time. That's such a good point. Some of us are very zoomed out at this point, and there's a maximum amount of virtual activities you can handle. And that's kind of a hard balance, right? Because you want to be included. And so you're saying, I don't feel safe being in person. Let's connect virtually. But then it's also sort of like, I don't really want to connect virtually either because I'm tired of it. And so sometimes it can be hard to be creative enough to get all of our needs met. But yeah, so just, it's important to have sort of open and honest conversations, because then at least you know what the real truth is, and then you can handle it and cope with it and figure out what the next step is, versus assuming we know, and then maybe we went down a different path than we needed to. The next slide. Okay. So connecting. So this is spoon theory. I am quite certain that everybody here has at least heard of it or seen of it, and somebody has talked to you about it. But it's something I talk a ton with patients about, and that is, you're given X amount of quote unquote spoons a day. So in this example that I found from Molly's fund, let's say you get 15 spoons a day. And so I think this is a really helpful analogy, especially to explain to our family and our friends and our coworkers and our church people that this is what life is like, that energy is a finite resource. And so you have to allot it appropriately so you can make sure you can get through the day. Like if you know that you need to take a shower and you only woke up with 3 spoons that morning because you're just feeling particularly just exhausted, and you have to take a shower, then socializing might be off the table. Then you might have to nix that because you need to take a shower. And so instead you're going to call your parents. And so it does kind of become this mathematical equation of like, how many spoons do I have? And how do I want to allot that energy? And like, what is really the priority of today? And this actually came up recently. I was listening to a Brene Brown podcast, and I quote her all the time, but she was talking with Adam Grant, and they were sort of talking about this concept in a different way, but they were just sort of saying how they were talking about it in the context of relationships, and how if both people are really tapped out, that this is how they sort of de-escalate their priorities. But I really think it's relatable in other contexts to say, okay, I have 10 spoons for today. And I thought I was going to go grocery shopping, but I know that's 4 spoons. And instead, I actually would rather take my kids to school or my grandkids to school, or I'd rather just run an errand. And so instead of grocery shopping, I'm going to have Instacart come and deliver my groceries for me, because that takes, that off my plate. And then I get those spoons back to do something that I want to do. And obviously I understand like taking kids to school involves contact, so that might be a different thing. But it just, the concept of knowing when, okay, I have 15 spoons today, I can go grocery shopping, or I can go stand outside or go for a walk, and I can go to the doctor, and I can take a shower, and I can clean out a drawer, and I can garden, and I can do all the things I want to do today. And like, this is a great day. And that's awesome. And so at least you know that. But then if you wake up on a day where you have 1 or 3 spoons, then you also already know in advance that like the plans for today are going to have to adjust. And so I think sharing this sometimes with friends and family can help them even conceptualize, oh, this is what she means when she says, this is why she can be on Facebook for 4 hours, but she didn't want to FaceTime me. Those are 2 very different things that require a very different amount of energy. Or, oh, why did she not want to FaceTime just because she wanted to take a shower? Well, because taking a shower takes a lot of energy. You don't realize how long you're standing for. You don't realize how much it takes to like wash your hair and to hold a blow dryer and to do any little bit of effort. Like, it requires energy. And people who don't have to worry about their energy levels and don't have to worry about fatigue, they don't think about that. They just take a shower like it's nothing. Like they don't even conceptualize or put numbers on their level of energy. Yeah, getting dressed is hard. Absolutely. So these are things that people who aren't immunocompromised and who don't have any kind of health issues, they just don't they just have no concept of this whatsoever. And so I find the spoon theory is not only helpful for people who have chronic illness, but I also find that it's really helpful in explaining it to other people. Oh yeah, someone also mentioned cleaning the dishes. Yes, like that is a task where you are standing, you're moving a lot, you're bending a lot, like you're exuding effort. And so sometimes people, even partners, may not understand, like, well, why could you not clean the dishes? Like, you couldn't just put those 3 dishes in the dishwasher. And you know what the truth is? Maybe today you couldn't. Maybe today you really just needed to eat and lay down, and like you'll do the dishes on a day where you have another spoon handy. And so sometimes, yeah, I just find this to be a really helpful analogy. So everything I'm about to say about some of the activities and ways that we can find connection and such, like, obviously, I also encourage you to do that through the lens of the spoon theory, and do what works for you. Okay, so here are some ideas of just things of ways to connect if you find that this is what you're looking for. So things to do individually. Part of that is taking care of yourself. I had a patient who during COVID, she was post stem cell transplant and just like truly could not like see another human. And so she said, you know what, if I have to be alone, then my skin is going to be the best it's ever been. I'm going to face mask every day. I'm going to put all the serums, do the lotions, like do all the oh gosh, I can't remember what the roller thing was called, like, but just all the things to her skincare. And she said, my skin is going to be the best it has ever looked. Like, if there's nothing else I can do all day, like, I'm going to do my skincare. And some people would apply that to like, trying out new hairstyles, or like I had a patient who was like playing with different beards and mustaches and like how to wax them and how to shave them, and just like playing with it all the time, dyeing it even. Some people play with makeup, even if it's, I'm going to get 8 hours of rest, even if it may not be sleep, because sometimes even if you're fatigued, sleep can actually be hard. Like just 8 hours of rest. Like this can be a time where you say, this is my like time where I can put A+ effort into taking care of myself and being like the best version of myself that I can be. Again, spoon theory, sometimes some of those things may or may not be possible, but that's one way to spend some time taking care of yourself. Also, maybe taking care of something else, and whether that is a plant, or herbs can be really low maintenance to grow sometimes, or getting a fish, just like something pretty easy that you can sort of take care of. And that can feel good. And even, people read to their plants, and people talk to their fish and their animals, and other inanimate objects in the house. I do it all the time. And sometimes that can just help to make you feel like you're not alone in this world, and someone else is listening, and that you're helping and you're taking care of something and helping it grow. So that can be something to do for sure. I know a lot of people enjoy gardening, which is awesome. Sometimes that might take a lot of energy, but gardening can be great. Oh yeah, someone just mentioned, I've been told doing nothing is doing something because it's self-love. And that 100%, absolutely. It actually, sometimes it's a skill for people to not do anything and to just be. Because sometimes we're really used to being on the grind and, working and or taking care of family and or taking care of a household, and just some of those things like really take up our entire day. Like truly just taking care of a household could take up an entire day. And so it really does take work to say, I'm going to just sit, and I'm not going to do anything. And I'm going to give myself full permission and be happy about it. Because most of the time when we're sitting, we're actually thinking about all the things we're supposed to be doing. We're thinking about all the people we're letting down, all the tasks we should be doing, and instead of just really enjoying that downtime. And so, yes, I absolutely agree. Doing nothing is doing something because it is self-love and it is self-care. So full support. Also, you can do a puzzle or read or write. And I say that also, even in puzzling, like you can do physical puzzle, but there's also puzzle apps on phones now. Even writing, like maybe you like to create, maybe you're artistic and you want to write a book, or maybe you want to write poems, or maybe you just want to journal, or maybe you just want to, kind of keep a record of your thoughts and your feelings each day. Maybe reading. And when I say reading, I know a lot of people sometimes groan, but maybe get out of the funk and read something completely different. Like you could read biographies about people, you could read fiction, you could like learn something new, you can read something nonfiction, you could read something historical. Like there's just so many different options of things that you could read. So you can try different styles. So there's a lot in there. Oh yeah, someone mentioned watercolors. Yes, watercolor art can be very soothing. And some of those things, it's kind of covered, I guess, under the learn a new skill or language or hobby. There are so many of these things that are done virtually now. Cooking stuff. I mean, obviously there's always been cooking shows, but now there's even cooking classes virtually. I know some people got really into tea. So like for some people, coffee was not going to work, even decaf, because they can't do the caffeine. But then they got really into tea and would like order tea from all these different places and try them and brew them in different ways and styles. And they just got really into it. And it gave them a community of other people to talk to, of people. They found someone on a Reddit thread who also really was into brewing tea. So sometimes those things can surprise you and be a great way to connect. Even like trading stock options or something along those lines. I know that's a pretty intense thing that requires a little bit of experience, but it's something that you can learn and practice and do. And it's a way to connect to other people. Paint by numbers is like kind of an old school one, but a really fun one. You can buy them on Amazon now and get them shipped right to you. So they're actually kind of a mindless but fun activity. And then you can hang them up in your house sometimes. Someone mentioned that getting back into creative writing really helped build a new network to some extent. Yeah. So definitely encourage creative writing. I think those are really great communities, like the creative arts. So I love that. Kind of on a similar note, music. So like play music, create music, curate playlists based on your moods or needs. And I hear this a lot from patients who have been isolated for a long time, that they really love music. And so they end up creating playlists. So like on a day when they're in a good mood, they have their music they want to listen to when they're in a good mood. Then they have a playlist of music that they want to listen to when they want to, like they're in a bad mood, but they want to be in a good mood. They have playlists they listen to when they're angry, playlists they listen to when they're kind of sad and they want to stay sad. Playlists that make them feel and make them cry, but it's a good cry. So lots of different playlists. I've had patients create playlists for other patients and other friends of like things they're going through. Someone said they took an old fish tank and turned it into a terrarium. That is awesome. I love that. Joining online groups and communities. I've mentioned this a few different times, but for almost any hobby or interest, there is some kind of Reddit thread, Facebook group, website, online community, something where people are connecting over that. I've even seen like plant groups and dog training groups and just like groups for everything. And obviously kind of have to pick and choose. I'll talk a little bit about that when I talk about social media in a second, but sometimes it can be a really good sense of connection with people because they enjoy things that you do too. And then lastly, practice mindfulness. And I know when I say mindfulness, a lot of people groan and they're like, oh, I just can't sit there and turn my brain off. Well, the goal really isn't to turn your brain off. It's really just to be present and to be mindful of your surroundings and of your body and of how you're feeling and how things are functioning. And it can really be a powerful tool. So I know that there's a lot of resources for this in the Sarcoidosis Awareness Foundation video library. So definitely recommend you checking that out. They did a whole series about this. So yeah, I also, full disclosure, just listened to another podcast Brene Brown did with someone who is an expert in mindfulness, and she's like a neurobiologist or something and has done research, and she really went into the hows and whys of like the benefits that it has in your life. And so it's also been really on my own mind lately. So those are some things that we can do individually, but that also kind of foster connection and foster a sense of sort of fulfillment. There's also some things we can do with others virtually. And some of those things are passive things. There are some active things. So some of the more passive things are like Netflix party, taking a tour of a museum or art gallery, which I find really cool because I think you can still have so much good discussion virtually while you're looking at cool art and things that you may not be able to see in person or travel to other countries to do. And or just have a phone on. I had this a lot with patients who were in the hospital during like peak COVID when they were not allowed to see anybody and no one was allowed to visit. And even the nurses weren't coming by very often. They would just turn their FaceTime on with someone and just leave it on. So like if they were sleeping, they were sleeping. If they were talking, they were talking. If they were reading, then the other person was doing something else. Like, you know, kind of when you're in the same space as somebody, you can still be sort of doing independent things, but at least you're sharing space. And there's sort of a comfort in that, just knowing that there's someone right over there. You can be like, oh yeah, hey, can you take a break from reading for a second? I thought it was a really funny thing. Or like, hey, let's talk about this. Or, oh my gosh, I saw the dumbest thing or whatever. So-and-so says hi. You kind of miss that when you're alone and when you're literally physically isolated. And so it can be nice just to have somebody on the FaceTime that's just kind of sitting there while the phone's there. Like you can engage with them or you cannot. So I had several patients actually do that and found that to be helpful. Someone mentioned doing an African safari, so you can do that virtually. That sounds awesome as well. Also, obviously, I'm an animal lover. And then there's some other active activities, and some of these can be more active than others. Obviously, depends on how much energy there is, but playing games. And so there's tons of online games from anything to Cards Against Humanity, bingo, just like regular games like solitaire, obviously with groups of people, trivia, video games. So tons of games that you can play with people that can be really fun. You can take a class with people, whether that's an educational class, an information class, like learning a new skill, learn a new language. There's tons of classes that you can take, like Coursera is a big one. I know there's tons of others. Masterclass is a really good one. I know there is a fee associated with it, but they have a lot of experts that like really do great sort of one-time class. It's almost like a TEDx kind of thing, which also you can watch so many TED Talks and all those cool videos on YouTube. So those are great. And then actually you can do something fun. I have not done an escape room virtually, but I have heard it's great. So escape rooms, I've had friends and patients do wine or scotch tastings, like something they can kind of do at the same time while they're all together, but obviously they're in different places, and then painting. So many different options in that regard. And things to do with others that are socially distanced. And this one was tricky because everyone has a different comfort level when it comes to even being socially distanced. And like I've mentioned, you know, for some people, you know, as long as you're a few feet apart, it's fine to not have a mask on. Other people want to be a few feet apart and have masks and have been able to disinfect the area, you know, and not remove those masks for any reason. And so there are absolutely different comfort levels with some of these things. But some things that we have found that have been reasonably safe and have recommended by some of our doctors is taking a leisurely walk in a park that has benches throughout. So obviously it's an important part for like when you get tired that you can sit down, you have a place to rest. I know some people have other options for where they can sit, but that's one of them. And truly like leisurely, like really take a super slow walk, and they can be several feet away from you and you can still hear each other. You can still communicate. Obviously you wouldn't want to go to a super busy place, but you can still probably take a leisurely walk in a park or even a parking lot with somebody. Go on a scavenger hunt around the city in separate cars. So that can be fun. Going stargazing is something also that you can do and be completely separate, but together in the same space. Playing music or enjoying music together. So if you are a musician or you enjoy playing an instrument, that can be a great thing to do. That's pretty socially distanced. Find some wall art near you and take pictures separately. So in a lot of cities now, they have a lot of wall art or graffiti parks or whatever you want to call them. And they're a great place to take pictures. And so I know in scrolling through social media, sometimes it's like, oh man, they went to this place that looks so cool. They got so many like great pictures, right? Because that's what we're always seeing people sharing is these pictures of all the cool things we're doing. And that can definitely make us feel like we're really missing out on things. And so the thing is, you can still go to that wall art, just go like a few seconds apart and take your own pictures and take some selfies, or go and stand in front of the wall and have someone, 10 feet away taking your picture. And then it still feels like something you're doing together. It's like a little photo shoot together. And that maybe is just something for the more young adult population, but I still feel like that's cool for anybody. And then just hang out. You can absolutely have a parking lot party and bring your own chair, bring your own food, bring your own drink. Like literally you can control your own little bubble, but still be able to laugh and still be able to talk. And, you could even like make cookies and share those cookies, but just bring them in their own little individual baggies for people and disinfect them as we hand them out. So sometimes we have to take some extra precautions and go to some extra lengths, but sometimes if that's what makes it possible, then obviously that's what makes it worth it. And I know someone said in the chat earlier, like they miss hugs and like physical touch, like just slapping someone on the arm when they say something funny, or like hugging someone, and especially hugging someone when you are feeling sad and that's all you really want. And so I wish like I had a really great idea for how to substitute that. I agree. I think there's just something about that physical human touch. I definitely saw images of people during the height of the pandemic who were in like little bubble suits that would still be able to hug and touch. And so that can be an idea if that works for you. Obviously, like warm blankets and stuffed animals and some of the things that people make fun of, but they're comforting for a reason. And so sometimes that can at least tide us over. Okay, so lots of different ways that we can think about connecting. There's still this aspect though of coping with it, right? So we still have all these feelings, and yes, we can try to seek all these ways of connection, but truly there may be just some times where there is no option, where you are isolated, you are at home, you are alone, you cannot go out, you cannot see people, and you don't feel good about it, and it sucks, and you're really sad, and you're really lonely. So then like, how do we cope with this? What do we do? Another theory that I like to bring up that I find extremely helpful is the ring theory. And there's a lot of different images of this. I find this one to be the clearest one, but it's really this concept of comforting in and dumping out. So the person who is directly affected, which would be you, would be in the center of the circle. And so from you, and then it goes out to direct family members and close friends, and then it's the close community, and then it's sort of like the outside community. And so the goal is that you should be able to dump out to your people, and then they should be dumping out to their outer circles, and then they can dump out to their outer circles. So that's always going outwards, so that what's coming in is always support. And so even if it can be hard to understand, just having someone support you and say, yes, I'm here for you and I can help with this, or I can deliver groceries, or I can pick something up for you, or I can handle this for you. And then maybe to their friend, they complained about things that are going on in their life, or how stressful it was for them, or how lonely they feel, even though it probably doesn't compare to the loneliness you're feeling. But it's just that then they can do that to someone else outside, but to you, it should feel like support. And so again, I like to go over this with patience, but I also think this is something really helpful to go over with like family members and loved ones, and especially like well-intentioned people who sometimes come and may need to really offload and share with you and talk about some of the struggles in their lives. And listen, maybe you want that. Maybe there's a time where you're like, I have nothing else going on. Please tell me what's happening in your life so I can have a distraction. I would love to help you work through a problem. There might be other times where you say, you know what? I feel like crap, and I do not have just the wherewithal, the energy, the mental energy. I have nothing to give you, and I can't like process this with you right now. So there can be both of those things. And so it can be helpful just to say like, here's where I'm at. And so like, I really can't be that for you right now. Like I need to protect myself and set some boundaries. Like what I really need is actually like comfort and support. And here's what that looks like. So I like to look at things like this through this ring theory lens. There was a comment in the chat that I want to mention really quick about that they wish people would stop acting like I don't matter or that I'm contagious. And that is a whole thing too, that for some reason, it seems like the people who are being sort of the safest and like protecting themselves the most somehow have this like label on them as of like, they're the contagious ones, or like they're the bad ones, like they're the ones to avoid. And I don't know how that sort of narrative got switched, but yes, that's very frustrating to feel like you're being avoided and like you're contagious when like really you're just the one that's trying to protect yourself. So I just wanted to like acknowledge that and validate it and normalize it. And I know that you're not the only one who feels that way. I think a lot of people absolutely do. So in talking about coping, I'll talk through this in multiple different ways, but so one framework here is sort of when you ask people like, how do you cope? A lot of people will tell me, I don't know. Like, what do you mean? And so it's such a big question, but it's actually a really pivotal thing to know about yourself. How do you cope? And there are a few different ways to break this down. So what I like to think of is what is helpful for you. So like what legitimately helps you? What makes you feel better? What improves? Like what coping mechanisms or strategies do you have that make you feel good and actually feel better. And that if you were, like level 10 sad, what could you do to get you to like the 9.5 and then to the 9, and just like, what helps, what chips away at some of those hard feelings? Then there are other coping strategies that are just neutral, that just kind of distract you, that just kind of numb you out. And sometimes I'll give you some examples of this in a second, but sometimes that's just binge watching like Netflix. Like that may not actively contribute, make you feel better, but it might just distract you for a period of time so that it gets the job done. And that's what we need, just to numb out for a little while. And then what coping strategies do you have that are not helpful? Listen, we all have them. Every single one of us, we all have them. And what that means is like, what kind of ends up making it worse? Ultimately, I know a lot of people will say like, I just sleep it off. And like sleeping actually can be a really helpful one, but if you sleep way too much, then that can actually not be helpful at a certain point. Or some people will say, I have a few glasses of wine. And like that could be a neutral or a helpful, but when you're having too much wine, then that goes into the unhelpful. And so like, if you find that it's making you feel worse, then I would put that in the not helpful category. And so when I ask people how they cope, but they say, I have no idea, or like, I don't know, I just get through it, then I can kind of work with them on this structure. So these are the questions I would ask to like help people think through identifying what their coping mechanisms are. And so, do you want structure? Do you not want structure? Everyone is very different. We're all different humans. So some people really like to have a set structure, a set routine, like something that is scheduled. Other people would say like, oh my gosh, having a schedule actually really stresses me out. I don't like that. What makes me feel better, actually what helps me, is to just be able to like free flow and, go from here to there and not have to worry about time and schedule and being so rigid. I like having no structure. So kind of, where do you fall on that? And what are you needing? Something structured, something not structured? Are you needing something that involves people or no people? And obviously this is challenging right now, and challenging if you're having to isolate and keep yourself safe. But yeah, do you want to talk to somebody about it? Like, can somebody help you? And if yes, like, yes, I do want people. I need somebody to rely on. I need somebody to vent to. Do you want that person to be someone who's really familiar to you? Or do you want that someone to be unfamiliar? Sometimes strangers actually give us the best support. And so which one is it? Like, what do you think will be helpful in this instance? Physical activity or rest. And so definitely we know that sometimes physical activity and exercise and being active can be really good for us. And it can like have physical benefits, it can have emotional benefits, and it can be really good. Sometimes also we need to rest, and like that rest will make us feel better. So definitely sometimes going for a run or going for a walk or being outside, that physical activity, that's the thing that you want to do and it will make you feel better. But there's another time where actually doing that would make you feel worse. It would make you feel more tired. It would make you feel more drained, and maybe just make you feel even worse. And so maybe rest is what might be more helpful. Practical or creative. So do you want to do something like very task oriented, like doing the dishes, or do you want to do something really creative and like play some music or make some playlists? Do you want to be distracted, or do you want to really focus? And so sometimes when we're having a hard time, actually, and I probably talked about this, I'll probably talk about it again. It's sometimes like you just need to sit in it, and you got to sit in the dark with it and just say, what is this? And what am I feeling? And why? And how did I get here? And it's really journaling, and it's processing, and it's thinking through it. There are other times where you've done that too much, you've ruminated on it a lot, and all you want is just distraction and to forget about this hard thing. And so sometimes distraction is what you need instead. And then internal or external processing, like, is it better for you to work through this on your own, or is it helpful to externalize this and like talk with somebody and like do something outside of yourself? And, typically I think people say a lot of times, like there's sort of a gender difference, and that women tend to externalize and men tend to internalize, but that's not always true. And sometimes it's different per situation and per person. So these are the questions I ask people of like think through for yourself what you think you need in general. And then take it the next step of, in this situation, is that still the same thing? And so when you're having let's say you're really feeling like left out and really lonely, that may be a one particular sort of game plan or coping strategy plan, which might look a little bit different from the times when you're feeling really frustrated and just really fed up and really angry that this is the situation that you're in. And so that could look like something very different, which can also maybe look different from the times when you feel like, I feel like this is hopeless. I feel like this is never going to end. You know, I don't know what the next step is. I feel lost. Those could all potentially be different sort of coping plans, if you will. And so sometimes when you're in a good place, that is the perfect time to make a plan like this, to think through what you might need when it's hard. Of course, when you actually execute that plan, you may say like, what was I thinking? This is not helpful. I do not like this. And then you just revisit the plan. Someone in the chat says like what's helped them is just being able to breathe and being able to hang out on my own and talk with my best friend. Yes, absolutely. Like find those people obviously is ideal. So some of the examples, I probably mentioned these already, but some of the helpful stuff can be like taking a walk or sitting outside. Just being outside sometimes is really helpful. Talking to someone really helpful. Journaling, doing a puzzle, like something that uses your brain, that allows you some time to think and process to yourself. Something neutral might be like binge watching TV or isolating even further, which I know is sort of counterintuitive, but sometimes when we're feeling lonely or we're not feeling like just good about ourselves and we feel disconnected, we actually isolate ourselves even further, which sort of can make it worse. Or sometimes it can make it neutral. So just that could be something. And then not helpful. So like I mentioned earlier, sort of alcohol, drugs, even prescription drugs, like if you take Benadryl too much to fall asleep, or if you're sleeping too much, like there are lines where some of these things are actually not helpful and not good for you in the long run. So some other tips and tricks to coping. I've mentioned this, like have a routine. So I said, have a plan, like have a plan, have a routine, assuming that routine is helpful for you. But especially in a time like now, like when we may be isolated and not going to work and not seeing the people that we're seeing, and our day-to-day routines are just completely different. And maybe it's not even related to COVID, and maybe it's related to sarcoidosis. Like maybe that is what has changed. And your routine is totally different. And so then thinking through, okay, what do I need out of my day? And I've talked to people where they said, my first rule was I had to change out of my pajamas. I could wear different pajamas, but I had to change out of the clothes I slept in at least. So that was one rule. It's like step one, wake up in the morning, I have to brush my teeth, and I have to drink a bottle of water, and I have to change into different soft clothes. And that at least got me to the next step. And then they said like the next step would be like washing their face, putting a face mask on. And then the next step was I'm going to drink some hot tea. Then I'm going to do something like a puzzle. Then I'm going to do something like quote unquote productive. And so they kind of had a routine set to where their hours were sort of broken up each day of like what they wanted to dedicate their time to. So having that routine was really helpful for them. I think it's helpful in general, typically. And then that can help sort of set realistic expectations for what the good days look like and what the bad days look like. And so you may say, okay, on a good day, this is how I like my days to look. And that may or may not be possible on certain days. So then if it's a good day, what does it look like? If it's a bad day, what does that look like? And again, having that coping plan and setting the expectation for what that looks like. And if you wake up in the morning and it's a 5-spoon day, but you planned a 20-spoon day, then you already know in the beginning of the day, adjustments are going to have to be made, and it's going to suck, and you're not going to like it, and you're not going to like canceling on people or feeling like you're letting people down. But when you start that you only have 5 and you're going to have to make adjustments. And so then you can tell yourself, okay, I know I'm going to have to cancel on some people, and I'm not going to feel good about that. And so instead, I'm going to sit outside when I would have done this, or I'm going to like have ice cream today because that's my special treat, or I'm going to get a new pair of shorts because I've been looking at these pair of shorts and I really like them, and I think those would make me feel better. So things like that, of like knowing what you might need in those instances. And again, might be hard until you're in that instance. Gosh, we're probably running out of time, huh? Okay, so filter exposure to social media and the news. And sometimes that means for people staying off social media entirely. For other people, it means they only use certain apps. And so some people find like, I know it's going to sound very millennial here, but like the TikTok sometimes actually is good because it's just like funny videos sometimes. And you can curate this list where it's only funny videos or only videos of animals or things that you find funny. And it kind of gets tailored to you. And you don't really have to connect with people or share with people or post anything of your own. Some people find Reddit to be really helpful. And they can just follow threads about plants, about animals, about a certain hobby. And then I know other people who they still have their social media, but they create sort of a separate like Instagram account where they only follow like cooking people and artists. And so then they know anytime they look, they're just going to see food and art, and they're not going to be triggered by pictures of people that are doing things, or of baby showers, or of weddings, or all these other things that people are doing without us. And so sometimes it's nice just to have a protected account where you're not at risk as much of being triggered. I mentioned this earlier, but like really identifying the feeling, acknowledging it, and executing the plan you've made in advance. I know it sounds so simple, but so many times we are struggling emotionally and we just don't really know what that emotion is. And so then it's hard to know how to attack it if we don't even know what exactly we're feeling. Sometimes I do think it's helpful to take control and plan something. So if you're a group of people, whether that's your family, your friends, your church friends, whoever, if they are continuing to do things without you and things that you can't do, and you find yourself, you're having to say no a lot, then like plan something you can do and tell them like, hey, here's something I can do. I planned it. All you have to do is show up, and here's what I need from you. And so that can be helpful. I understand also sometimes we don't have the energy for that. Sometimes there are just multiple factors that may be involved in that or make that not possible. But sometimes I do think that's helpful. When you find yourself catastrophizing, change the channel. Sometimes we find ourselves just going down these deep, dark rabbit holes of things will never change, and it's always going to be this way. And, you know, I'm never going to connect with people again. I'm never going to get to hug people again. I'm not going to have a social life again. It's always going to be this way. And so sometimes it's helpful to say like, you know what, I am really feeling like really down about this. I'm like on level 10. I hate this. So then like, I'm going to shut this channel down and I'm going to change it. And I'm just think about like animals and funny stories and dumb videos. And I'm going to just tune out of these thoughts and switch gears. And most importantly, probably connect with somebody who gets it. And people have been mentioning this in the chat several times. Connect with someone who gets it, and they are out there. I know they might be hard to find, but there is somebody out there who gets it. Absolutely. And even when in connecting with online groups and organizations, like you might go to a support group, you might go to a cooking class, you might go to something online, and you don't really find like you connect with 90% of the people there. But if you find one person that you connect with, like that can be your person. Or you could find on an Instagram post, like that you find something in common with someone, you see them posting a lot and you really like what they post, like you can connect with them. I'll breeze through this a little bit, but so some of this also comes back to goal setting. So like if you have something you've been really wanting to do and like you just know it's not possible, you still want to like pick the goal, name it. Think about what aspects of it are really meaningful to you. So like, is it the actual travel and the trip to Europe, or is it just the eating the food and having the coffee, or having a different schedule, or the atmosphere, or like what part of it is it that you really liked about that? What was meaningful about it to you? Is it maybe it was even the people you were planning to go with? And then breaking down into categories of what is feasible, what's not feasible, and then what you're not sure of. Then you can take the feasible parts and then kind of brainstorm what that could look like for you. And ideally, it will be helpful to chat with somebody who can help you with that, because sometimes we need others to get us thinking outside the box. So sorry to go through this quickly, but last reminders is like in all caps, you're not alone. It feels that way, and it can feel very isolating and very lonely, and all the feelings that we've been talking about all night, but you are not alone. 100% chance there's someone also who is feeling like that. And so just, you're not alone. I always recommend people finding a therapist and or a support community. I always advocate for individual therapy, but I think even if it's not therapy and if it's not a support group, just a support community. Try new hobbies, even if you're bad at them. This is the biggest thing. So many people would say, I'm not a good writer, I'm not a good artist, I'm not a good cook. Just try it. Just try it and be bad at it. And then if you really want to stop it, stop it. But you could also, one, work on the skills and get better, but who cares if you're bad at it? Maybe you love to paint and you're a terrible artist, keep painting. Rework the normal. Comparison is the thief of joy. And I cannot echo this enough. I think this happens all the time, especially in chronic illness, that it's like, oh, well, you know, my shortness of breath isn't as bad as yours, or my condition's not as bad as yours, or I don't have the same level of X, Y, or Z as you do. I didn't have to have the same treatments. Like we sometimes, even within our own little small communities, like pick apart sort of our experiences and compare to somebody else. And are we allowed to be feeling this way, even though we didn't have X, Y, or Z? And like, there's just, and empathy is not finite. We can all support each other and be there for each other and love each other. Identify your coping mechanisms, which we talked about, and make a game plan for the bad days. So I'm probably like right at time. So thank you. Here's my email if you have any questions. And I'm sure there are other ones in the chat that I didn't even see. Mindy, is there anything that I didn't cover or should cover, or I should answer really quickly?
Yeah, we did have a question in the chat about how do you address well-meaning family and friends when they continuously ask you if you're better, when your disease is incurable. It makes them feel very lonely and isolated. I will just, before you go into that, Wendy, note that we have a webinar actually on empathetic communication. And it's a really super useful one. Not that you can answer it, Wendy, but that's a really also great one to really address that question in depth with a whole hour of it.
Yes, and so I will say, check out the webinar, and my best answer is it's if you set the boundaries and you just have to say, hey, I've heard this several times, and I know you keep saying, when is it going to be better? The answer is never going to change. It is not going to get better. This is what it looks like. This is what it sounds like. This is what it feels like. And here is how I would like for you to operate in the future. Here's the questions you can ask me. Like, it's not getting better, but instead of asking, am I better? Or is it fixed? Or like, how are things? Here are the questions you can ask me that will actually help me answer the status. So that would be my short, quick answer to that one, but boundaries basically.
Great, thank you. I think that was the only one. And yes, I will send the link to the webinar in the email actually at the end of this with the link to the video as well. It's also in our video library, which the link is in the chat. So if you look in the chat, you'll see the link to the video library and it will get you there as well. So Wendy, thank you so very much for this amazing session. It was super helpful. I think there was a lot of new insight information that I know our patients really appreciate. I can see the chats. Everyone's very excited for this information and feel like it's helpful. So I also want to give a reminder to everyone that we really do value your feedback. We have a super short survey, I promise, about this webinar. We would love to get your feedback on it. For those of you who are using Zoom in the browser, this should automatically take you there once you leave the webinar. If not, I have added the link there in the chat and you can use that. And some of the other links I'm going to discuss really briefly because I know we're over time. Additionally, I want to remind folks that we have our 3rd annual virtual education summit, Unveiling Possibilities, July 30th and 31st. And we're bringing together experts to share insights on sarcoidosis, as well as a robust platform for virtual networking. So obviously this is a webinar on isolation. It's an opportunity to really connect with other people who get it. And part of that includes a day-long coffee break it's basically an open Zoom room to pop in whenever you want throughout the 2 days and talk to others who are enjoying and attending the conference. Registration is open and we also have a limited number of scholarships available as well. So make sure to check that out. That link is in there as well. If you haven't already, please join the FSR community to stay up to date on news, events, and clinical trial opportunities. And finally, we must also thank our donors for their continued support of FSR. We cannot provide programming such as this webinar without support of our generous donors. So if you would like to help us ensure this kind of programming remains free of charge for all patients and their supporters, we hope you consider supporting FSR. We have a variety of ways to show your support, and you can find out more via the link I sent in there in the chat, or by visiting our website. So thank you all again for joining us today. And thank you again to Wendy, the most amazing, for this amazing webinar. And this was a fantastic presentation, and we hope everybody has a great night.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, guys.